Hey, how you doing? My name's Dave and I am so delighted to meet you via video on a very special day for me. You see, it's August 18th, which marks 14 years since I was in a plane crash and for 20 minutes would lie lifeless in the front seat of a Cessna 172. Dead or barely alive, beside my deceased friend, Guðni Kristjánsson. Shout out to his family. Today's a difficult day for all of us. Thankful for my friend Elliot, who would come back to the plane. He was also in the plane crash, who would come back, and even though he's covered in gasoline, injured, he would come back to the plane. And even though for all he knew, I was dead, he would shout my name and flip. I get emotional, I'm tired. Oh man. You know, folks, we don't know how long we have on this planet, you know. And I think the days in which we live, I think it's becoming more and more real how precious life is, right? And so today is always a day, every single year, where I'm reminded of, how precious life is. Excuse me. I'm reminded how precious life is. I'm reminded how short life is. And I'm also reminded of the fact that every single day we get to live out our destiny. You know, every single one of us has been created for a purpose and meaning. And the beautiful thing about it is that it's our choice whether we decide to become the very thing that we've been created to be. And so today, I want to continue that journey of my destiny, and which is to give you a message. I got a message, man. I got a message. And my message is really simple. 7. Yeah. Some of you are like, okay, he lost it. He's finally, after 14 years, his mind of the plane crash, he's lost it. Well, maybe. My message is really simple. In fact, it's a character, it's a number, it's the number 7. You see, I have come to believe, and I fundamentally at the crux of it believe that if you and I were to simply understand and grasp the significance of 7, I mean, I got the thing tattooed on my arm, that's how precious it is to me. If you were just to understand the significance of 7 and the omnipresence of the number 7, that means it's all around you, it's ubiquitous, it is all around you. It's God's number, isn't it? The very first chapter of the Bible concludes by God declaring the 7th day holy, a day of rest, and a day of completion. And so, hey, listen, I just want to take about a half an hour of your time and tell you the many ways in which 7 is around you everywhere all the time. And I think that by the end of it, my hope is that I kind of lead the audience to this place, to recognizing that God's hand is unmistakable in creation. That when you see the 7s, which is Yahweh's number. There's other lowercase g gods in the universe that claim different numbers, like 8, 9, 13, 108. But Yahweh alone is like, hey guys, my dibs on 7. Yeah, Yahweh's like dibs on 7. It's God's number. So for this video, on this very special day for me, I want to share with you 7. I'm gonna come out swinging with a big one, and it's this one, the solar system. You see, most of us were taught at an early age that the solar system revolves around the sun. No, it doesn't. The solar system revolves around a 7, an invisible barycenter of the solar system. Yeah, most people don't realize this, but in less than a decade ago, scientists discovered this fact that the crux of our solar system isn't the sun. It's an invisible space outside of the sun, precisely 7% of the radius of the sun, or 1,700 kilometers. You see, what that does is it allows for the first 4 planets. We got Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. And you got the sun, and what they do is they do a bit of a salsa. They go back and forth, okay? Put me on a dance floor at a wedding, you know, I got some moves. I don't know how to salsa, but you know, you got some moves like this, right? It's a difference between a grade 6 dance, all right? You see Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune outside of the asteroid belt, those gassy giants, get them gassy giants out of here, they do a very boring dance. They do a grade 6 dance, which of course is you barely touch the girl. You're like this, right? No salsa and back and forth. You're just doing this. How you doing? Jupiter, Saturn, and them gassy giants, they're doing boring circles, and what they do is actually their magnetic fields actually protect and hug the inner part of the solar system in, and they're very protective in nature. However, the dance of the Earth and the 4 planets, what that does, guys, is this. It actually produces the ability for life to be sustained in our solar system. Here's what you need to hear. You see, most solar systems are actually binary systems, meaning that they are 2 suns in the center. Some of them actually consist of 6 stars. One of the stars in the Big Dipper, we zoomed in really, really close and we found out there's actually 6. Now you might think, oh, that's super cool. And it is, but with greater amounts of complexity, that means that life sustainability is decreased. Hint, hint, here's a biological principle that actually is transferred into a spiritual, relational one. If you want less life sustainability in your life, increase the complexity of your life. You see, the reason why the solar system is a life-giving system is because at its center is only one sun. But in order for that one sun to exist alone on its throne, it needs a barycenter. Our solar system is a life-giving system because of an invisible 7. The next 7 I think that you will know about, of course, is time. This is a really big one because you enjoy time, right? Time is given to us in 7 days. We are governed by 12 months, but the way in which we enjoy time, of course, and record it is in the 7-day week. Now, did you know that the French actually tried to change this a couple hundred years ago? They're like, hey, we need to get more work out of our people, more productivity out of our people. So let's break the 7 and go into a 10-day work week. That is to say 9 days of work and 1 day of rest. Imagine how terrible that would be. And it was. Not only did they almost collapse their economy, they almost destroyed their whole country. They went back to 7 very quickly. You see, 7 is the key to life. Not only is time given in 7 days, but the way in which time hits you like a wave in seconds, minutes, hours turning into days, days turning into weeks, weeks turning into months, and months turning into a year. You see, the way in which time is actually produced is in frequencies of 7 as well. Speaking of time, I want to talk about some of the important times of our life. Childhood and teenage years, both in formations of 7. You know, Aristotle said these words. He said, "Give me a child until he is 7, and I will show you the man." Here's a philosopher who would mentor Alexander the Great, one who would change the world. We still feel the ramifications of this man even today. You see, what Aristotle is tapping into there is the fact that our neurological network of our brain, its formation is foundational in the first 7 years of our life. He says, man, give me a child until he's 7, I'm gonna show you who he becomes. Now, our teenage years are years of relational foundation, and they are also in periods of 7. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. Much of the way in which our brain organizes information is also in terms of 7. Something called our sequential memory, our ability to remember numbers in sequences or shapes, is also in orders of 7. That's why our phone numbers outside of the area code is 7 digits long, and also why Scrabble will give you 7 characters at the beginning of a game. Presenters and authors know that our attention span is also in orders of 7. The reason why you have many books that say 7 habits to a better marriage or 7 principles to a better business is because the way in which our attention span is ordered is in frequencies of 7. Now, much of this may be because numerically and mathematically, 7 is what's called the optimal prime number. Prime numbers are the strongest numbers, and 7 is the optimal prime number, making it the strongest. It's the Optimus Prime number. That is my attempt at Transformer voice. Yeah, the 7 is what's called the optimal prime number. Prime numbers are mathematically the strongest numbers, and 7 is the optimal prime number. It's also our luckiest number and our favorite number, which probably go hand in hand. In dice, it is the highest probability. There's a guy in the ancient world that traveled the whole world asking this question: what is your favorite number? And it was a landslide. It was 7. This was back in about the 1200s. Now, recently, a mathematician named Alex Ballas did the exact same thing. But instead of spending a whole lifetime doing it, he did it in an afternoon asking his audience. And he had 40,000 or 44,000 responses, and 7 is still our favorite number. Which also may tie into sports, why many athletes who carry the number 7 are the most paid and also the most favored athletes of all time. According to the Bible, 7 is the number of completion. And also in sports, playoffs for NHL and NBA and other sporting arenas, the way in which they conclude their season is, of course, in orders of 7. This next one is also a really big one. It's one that you enjoy frequently, and it's music. That's right, music is in a scale of 7. This is actually why Isaac Newton and many others have believed that there's a connection between light and music, because I'm going to get to it in a moment. Light is in frequencies of 7. But let's talk about music for a moment. I had something kind of cute happen recently where I took my kids and some friends to like a ghost town up in Revelstoke, British Columbia. And there was this old ancient piano. And my kids, they jumped onto the bench and they started down, 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 down. And it was cute for a little while. But one of our friends, her name was Bree. She kind of whispered, she says, well, I know how to play piano. I'm like, you know how to play piano? She says, yeah, I know how to play piano. And she sat down, and the moment she started playing, of course, to a scale of 7, the response was immediate. You see, everyone began to enjoy the sounds, the vibrations of the piano. Why? Because now it was hitting their ears, not in frequencies of 10, 12, whatever. It was hitting their eardrums in frequencies of 7. The heptatonic scale shows us that it is ordered in 7s. So one of the patterns that I've noticed, and you're going to notice in this presentation, is that much of what we experience is governed by 12, but the way in which we experience it is in 7s. So 12 months, 7 days. But from what I understand about music is that there's 12 notes and 7 scales. But from my research, I couldn't really differentiate between the two. So if you are a musician, if you could comment below and just let me know what the difference between the 12 notes and the 7 scales are, because there is a principle of 12 and 7, which actually leads us to the next one, which is the ocean. Another really big one, really important one. I don't know about you, but I've watched some documentaries recently that make me really scared, and oh man, it breaks my heart for the ocean. But did you know that the ocean gives water or waves in frequencies of 7? If you stand at the beach and you count the number of waves and you notice the strongest wave, about 77% of the time, the 7th wave will be strongest. So from the bottom of the ocean, and some parts of the bottom of the ocean we haven't even gotten to, the frequencies of water is 7, but the ocean is governed by 12. So if you are sitting in the vast ocean and the ocean is still, the frequencies of water underneath you are 12 to 16. Now 16, you're getting into some rougher waters. 17, 18, into the 20s, you're talking storms. So the ocean, a peaceful ocean, is governed by 12, but as the ocean comes to give life, minerals, to land and to humans, the larger distortion waves, they begin to collapse. So those 12s will begin to make 7s about 77% of the time. So again, another 12 to 7 pattern that's seen in nature. And now that we're on the topic of the ocean, did you know that we actually count 7 oceans and 7 continents? There are 7 Roman numerals in their numerical system. And there's also 7 sectors in the liberal arts. For all of you travelers, those who are wanting to travel, the 7 wonders of the world. The first and last wonder of the world, I think, requires some of our attention. It is the Pyramid of Khufu. Not only is this the most architecturally accurate building in the world, but it is created in orders of 7. You see, the very central passageway in this pyramid is in 7 lengths. Not only that, but it is corbelled in 7 corbels. If you were to cut the pyramid in half, you would notice that it actually looks like a rainbow ascending to the king's chamber. Now, interestingly enough, the king's chamber is layered in the color red. Why is that important? Because in the color spectrum, the color red is the 7th color. 7 was an incredibly important number in the ancient world, and obviously the creator of the pyramid agreed. Right beside the pyramid is the Nile River Delta. Now the Nile River, again in the ancient world, had incredible importance. For many it was believed to be the river of life. Important to note that in much of human history, the Nile River Delta had 7 mouths. When talking about red being the 7th frequency in the color spectrum, I find it interesting that the Red Sea, the sea that Moses split open with the staff and evil Pharaoh came in and all of his chariots were crushed by it. Have you ever noticed that when looked at from the west, the Red Sea is actually in the shape of a 7? Now, on the topic of business, I want to talk to you briefly about the main function theory, which states this, is that the best relationship between productivity and functionality is the number 7, 7 main functions. Now you see this applied all over business, and you also see it in the way in which we process many things. And even technology is not detached from the power of 7. Did you know that the information that is being portrayed to you right now on the screen comes from a server from somewhere far away on Facebook or YouTube or wherever you're watching this from, and it goes through something called the OSI model. The OSI model is the channels by which all information technologically is delivered, and lo and behold, how many channels are there? 7. When it comes to measurement, there are only 7 different ways to measure things called base units. Now, when it comes to acidity versus alkalinity, 7 is pH neutrality. Now, for this next part, this one really matters because we're going to go into matter itself. Matter has 7s all around it. The foundation of matter is in fact 7. The principal energy of an electron is 7. Now, the reason why that's important is the principal energy of an electron is actually the reason why our periodic table has 7 layers. Now, arguably one of the most important of the elements is nitrogen, which has an atomic value of 7. And why is this important? Because it is foundational to DNA and RNA and life in general. It's arguably one of the most important elements and has an atomic weight of 7. So now that we're talking about the atom, I'm gonna go even deeper than the atom. We're gonna break open the atom into the subatomic world. Okay, sub meaning like submarine. We're gonna go even deeper. Hold your breath for this one, all right? We're going subatomic. Let's do it. Hopefully I don't lose you. You see, when you go into the subatomic world, it's full of 7s, which is crazy to me. Not only is the cosmos ordered by 7, but break open the atom and it's 7 as well. Let me explain it this way. Einstein's theory of relativity explains this reality around us, right? And it's a working theory. Okay, notice my piece of gum? It drops. It works, right? It's and when and the math E equals mc squared, it works. But the quantum understanding of the world, which is to say the 2-dimensional quantum electromagnetic field that exists around us, the unseen world, well, that is also a working language. It's a little bit harder to prove, but I can prove it to you right now. The fact that you're watching me right now on a screen through Wi-Fi, you are right now leveraging matter in terms of a wave aspect. That is a quantum understanding of the world. So right now in this moment, the fact that you're being held to the earth by its gravitational pull and you're watching me on a screen, you're enjoying both the quantum world and you're enjoying both the particle world. But the thing is, guys, is that theories that have been designed by Einstein's theory of relativity and quantum physicists, guys like Niels Bohr, you know what's really interesting is that here's a picture of Einstein and Niels Bohr. These two guys, geniuses in their respects. And they're friends, but they're two theories which work. They don't communicate. Já, góðan og blessaðan daginn. Mjög gott að sjá þig, félagi. I just spoke Icelandic. I spoke a language. It's a working language that's actually only understood by very few people. So it's a working language. It's a beautiful one, but only very few people know it. If you were to choose any language to know, it'd probably be Spanish. I think it's the most commonly spoken language in the world. Anyways, so here are two languages that are working languages, Einstein and Niels Bohr. They both work. However, when they speak to one another, guess what? They don't speak. Quantum mechanics and the theory of relativity, they try and talk and they just don't talk. It wasn't until 7, something called string theory M. Now, in the 19th century, string theory was tousled and worked on, and it wasn't until 1995 at a conference in California where string theory M was proposed, and it still remains to be the best mathematical description, best bridge between these two worlds, these two philosophies that both work and that we both leverage as human beings. And here's what I want you to notice, is that 7 is at the crux of string theory M in a few different ways. String theory M proposes that there are 5 different ways in which strings formulate themselves and give us the reality in which we experience. Now, not only that 5, but there are 2 other invisible realms that must exist in order for the theory to work. Now, sometimes scientists call that multiverses and use other terms like bulk. Which I happen to believe is a very poor terminology, because string theory M's bulk, which is in orders of 7 two-dimensional frequencies, may very well be the mathematical description of the heavenlies themselves. Now, I may make a video at another time describing that. 7. Something also in string theory M is what's called supersymmetry. And this proposes that each of the particles or each of the quantum realms are supersymmetrical within one another in 7 formation. And notice that 2 of them are sacred, or they're different, and there is a principle of the sacred 2. Also in string theory M is what's called the 11-dimensional supergravity. Now, I'm just going to get really briefly into this. When they were originally toying with string theory, they were trying to do it in our 4 dimensions. Height, width, length, and time. But it wasn't working. Again, Einstein, Niels Bohr wasn't working. It wasn't until somebody was like, hey, guys, why don't we throw a 7 in there? Yeah, just toss a 7 in there. Well, what do you mean, Bill? Well, instead of doing 4, throw a 7 in there. 4 plus 7 is 11. Guys, the moment that they began doing the math in 11 dimensions, it began to work. The 2 began to communicate. And so there's more 7s, but I feel like I'm gonna lose you. Let's keep going. Here's what you need to know. The subatomic world is ordered in 7s. All right, let's move away from the subatomic world for a moment and let's go back into space and take a look at what the ancients believed about the world that surrounded us. The 7 wandering bodies. You know, the word planet actually means wanderer. And it comes from how the ancients believed that we belong to a system of 7. And that's because from the naked eye, we can only see 7 wandering planets. One of them being arguably the most beautiful, the planet of Saturn, having these 7 beautiful rings. Coming back to the Earth, did you know that the Earth is electrocuted anywhere from 50 to 60 times every single second? You gotta kind of feel bad for the Earth, but this is meant to be, because what it does give us is what's called the Schumann resonances. This is effectively the electromagnetic heartbeat of the Earth. Because the Earth is constantly being electrocuted, like zzz, 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 it creates this electromagnetic field around it. And here's what I want you to notice. These Schumann resonances are in orders of 7. The heartbeat of the Earth is 7. Now, something that I find very curious is that there is actually a correlation between the human mind and the Schumann resonances. There's some great articles that show how the Schumann resonances seem to actually increase during times of war and during times of distress. Now, in the color spectrum, the 7th color is red. This is a profound color, and it is the slowest of frequencies. You see, purple is number 1. It's the strongest of frequencies. The reason why royalty wear purple and they actually stand above everybody and wave at them is because, well, they believe that they are one, right? So they're above everybody and they wear purple. Notice that when a baby comes out of its mother's womb, what color is it? It's purple. Why? Because it's the first minute, first day, but then when the skin oxidizes, it turns a normal color. But it is purple in its first few moments of life. Red is the 7th color in the frequency, and it is the slowest color. Now what's interesting is this, is that when you get in contact with things that are red, guess what? You actually begin to adopt the frequency of red. Fire, for instance. When you get in front of a fire or when you go in a sauna, what happens to your heartbeat? Well, your heartbeat begins to slow down. Your skin turns red. When you drink red wine or alcohol, which is a depressant, what happens to your heartbeat also? It slows down. Sometimes if you have a lot of alcohol, your speech will begin to slow down or slur. Your skin, for many people, will turn red and your eyes turn red. Notice that a stop sign, which is red, is meant for you to slow down, to stop. Now when it comes to the sun, when we wake up, when the sun is rising, it gives off blue light. The same thing that actually our screens give off. And that's why many of us, when we just stare at our screens, we stay up so late because it's giving off blue light and it's telling your brain to wake up, to stay up. But when you sit and you stare at a sunset, did you know that the red colors of a sunset trigger something in your circadian system in your brain, or sometimes called the clock of the body, and it actually produces melatonin, a chemical to make you sleepy and slow down. So the color red is, yes, a color of passion and a color of violence, and we can talk about that in further videos, but it is the color in the lowest of frequencies. And when we actually as human beings get in contact with things that are red, many times we begin to adopt the frequency of red, which is slow. Now we've talked about a lot of amazing, beautiful, complex systems, but let's not forget the most beautiful, complex system of all. You, the human body, made in the image of God. Did you know that every 7 years, the human body completely renews and restores every single ligament, every single atom, every single cell in the body? Every 7 years is renewed. That ought to be hopeful to those who are feeling the effects of aging. Did you know that your head has 7 holes? You can go ahead and count. Go ahead, count the holes in your head. I'm just gonna have a sip of my coffee. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And your head sits on top of 7 cervical vertebrae. The area where all of the very important neurons and neurological network, your nervous system, your trachea sits, it's all within this very important 7. Now again, with the principle of 12, we are governed by 12, but life is given in orders of 7. What's really cool is that your core, from the bottom of your cervical vertebrae to the bottom of your back, is governed by 12 vertebrae. And out of those 12 vertebrae are 12 ribs, so 24 in total. But notice that you don't have 24 ribs in your front. Rather, just like the ocean, governed by 12 but gives life in orders of 7, your ribs come around and connect in 7 places in the sternum. Sternum, of course, is of great importance because this is the area where much of life is actually not only held, but given. Notice that in the female body, the area where you give nourishment and life to your child through breastfeeding is in this area. Where a man's strength to be given to his home is given in this area. So we are governed by 12, but life is given and held in orders of 7. And also, when it comes to the rib cage, laughter. Laughter is something that occurs in the diaphragm. It's something that we all enjoy. Statistically, we are laughing a lot less than 100 years ago. Do you know that 100 years ago, the average North American laughed for something like 17 to 18 minutes a day, and the average person in our day and age laughs somewhere around 7 to 8 minutes a day. We ought to be laughing a lot more. But laughter occurs in the diaphragm, which sits in the 7 lowest ribs. Outside of 7, there is no laughter. And when it comes to the nose, there are only 7 primary smells that our nose can smell. The human heart, which it rests underneath the sternum, also is in frequencies of 7. Just like the ocean, did you know that every 7th heartbeat is strongest? Because it's a complex system, God creates it to have a system of 7. We know that the largest killer of humanity is heart disease or dis-ease. Now remember, the number for rest is 7, and disease is dis-ease or dis-rest. Anytime that the heart goes outside of its normal frequency, which is orders of 7, we call that heart disease. And once you break 7, you don't last for very long. Also, a connection with the ocean is, did you know the same exact salt percentage of the water in the ocean is the salt percentage in your blood? The heart is arguably, outside of the brain, one of the most, if not the most important organ, because if you don't have a functional heart, you don't have a functional life and you won't be around for long. It is in orders of 7. Do not break 7. When it comes to the strength of your hand, if you notice, the grip of your hand is in 7 layers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there is something that I'm going to explore in further videos, and it's a spiritual principle. It's called the Hieros Beta, or the Sacred 2, and it occurs in many, many systems of 7 where there is a sacred 2, a sacred strength, a 2 that is separate. Like in your cervical vertebrae, the top 2, the C1 and the C2, they are different from the bottom 5, and they're structurally meant to be so that they, the head sits on something strong, and there's a lot of kind of, extra strength in the bottom and the top 2. But notice also in your hand, in the grip, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there's a sacred 2 or a strength stronger 2. Your hand strength is found in 7. Now, your skin, the thing that holds all of you together, has 7 layers and also has a Hieros Beta, a sacred 2. The lowest or the bottom 2 layers underneath your skin are where the bulb of the hair sits. What's interesting about this, at least to me, is that hair is actually dead. Yeah, your hair, you can put as much nourishment in your hair. I mean, you look good, but your hair doesn't come alive anymore. It's still dead. It looks good, but it's dead. The only place where your hair is actually alive is within the skin. Again, a spiritual principle is life is held within 7. If you go outside of 7, there is only death. Did you know that in the Bible, the number 8 means to be cut off? The male was circumcised on the 8th day. In the story of Noah's Ark, which was a judgment upon humanity, which God promises never to do again, and what is the sign? It is the sign of the rainbow, the delineations of light. We're going to get there in a moment. But there are 8 people on board of Noah's Ark. The Day of Atonement, which was like this really sacred day where sin was atoned for in the Old Testament, a goat was sacrificed and the blood was placed on the scapegoat, and the scapegoat was taken to the land of forgetfulness. The sin was forgotten. We can go for a preach there about Jesus caretaking upon our sin and being really cast away outside of the city where he was sacrificed on a cross. Oh man, thank you, Jesus, for taking upon our sin. 8, that happened, the Day of Atonement happened on the 8th day following the 7th festival of the Jewish calendar. 8 is the number of being cut off. And 8, outside of 7, is an absence of light, or should I say of life, and also of light. Notice that there are 7 frequencies. Now the last one is this. It is light. I'm already talking about the rainbow. Guys, I could have from the very beginning just said, guys, life is ordered in 7s because light has 7 frequencies. Sir Isaac Newton was the first one to discover this using a prism many, many years ago, and to show that light delineates itself, yes, in hundreds, you can argue hundreds of frequencies. However, they are anchored into 7 main frequencies. And outside of those 7s, you have infrareds, you got the ultraviolets above, but those frequencies you do not see. The frequencies that are seen by the human eye are 7. And I find it interesting that when Jesus described hell, he described it as outer darkness. That is to say, outside of light or outside of 7. See, at the end of this, I ultimately want to bring the atheists, hopefully, to the point where they begin to question some of their atheism. Because to believe that this is all a cosmic accident, well, I believe goes against the very fundamentals of mathematics themselves. To the theist, that is to say, to the person who does believe in God, I would say, man, that's awesome. I think that we have far more in common than we do different. However, I would say, how does your worldview and philosophy match up with 7? You see, there are lots of philosophies and religions that flex other numbers. That say, oh, we're 8. The path is 8. Or we're 9. We're going to carry the 9. Or 108. Now, I'm not here to disrespect anybody or to point anybody out. But you can do your own research and you'll quickly find out that most other religions, well, they flex other numbers. And that's okay. I'm not here to diss anybody other numbers or anything, but I would just ask this question. Listen, all of life is ordered in 7. And so for you to claim the sacredness of other numbers, well, I would question that. I would question the validity of that. I would question the word is teleos, or the teleology of that. That is to say, the end result of that. You know, if I'm speaking to a coder, you know, it's very frustrating. My friend is a coder. He codes things. It's frustrating to him when at the end of doing a lot of work for code, when at the end of it, the code doesn't work. It's not a functional code. He's done a lot of work, and that he wishes at the very beginning he would have just changed something with the code, because at the end of it, the code was a cul-de-sac. It didn't work. So there are a lot of codes out there. There's a lot of philosophies, but the code that is everlasting is the code of 7. You can do a code of 8 or code of 9, but I'm telling you, the teleology of that code is much shorter. So to the theist, I would say, how does your worldview match up with 7? And to those who are like, Dave, I don't even know what an atheist or a theist, or I'm just out there, I don't even know. I would say, hey, guess what? You're in good company. A lot of us are trying to figure it out. But you know what? There is one who knows, and his name is Jesus, and he loves you so much so that he would die for you to give you new life, to give you freedom, to take your sin and to bury it with him. And he rose again to give you new life. You know what it requires for you to start a new relationship with God? Not more work, but faith. And the right type of faith, the right type of code. And it's the faith in his son, Jesus. It's the faith in Jesus. I can tell you from personal experience that Jesus has changed my life. He's changed everything about my life. And my life would not be the same if it wouldn't be for him. And so, at the end of this video, I just want to encourage you to put your faith in Jesus. And what that looks like is literally believing in him and then choosing to pick up this isn't even a word, this isn't even a book, this is a living, double-edged sword, and begin getting into it and seeing what Jesus actually says about himself and about his environment, and begin to do the things that Jesus tells you to do. The moment you do that, guess what the Bible promises? Eternal life. The code, the teleos, he says that, by the way, I am the Alpha and the Omega, I am the beginning and the end. And what he means by that is that he literally says, I am the arche, the archetype, the concept, and the end, the teleos. He says, I am the right code. And so to those who are just searching, I would say, man, Jesus is real. And if there's ever a time to put your faith in him, it's now. I'm going to say a word of prayer for you, and I hope I made you think. God, I thank you so much for the person listening right now. And Lord, I thank you for the many ways that you order our cosmos and order our body. Lord, I pray against disease right now. I pray those who are feeling sick right now, I pray that you would order their bodies. Lord, I pray the Holy Spirit would heal every single part of their body. Lord, I pray for those who have right now depression and anxiety, maybe their neurological network just mixed up. Lord, I pray for order in their minds. Lord, I pray for those who are feeling fear. Lord, I pray for an emotional and a spiritual rest that isn't based upon circumstances, but rather is given from you, that has divine origins. Lord Jesus, we love you. Father, right now, I pray that there would be some listening who would, for the first time, they would recognize their own brokenness, their sin, and they would cast their brokenness and sin onto you by confessing it, saying, Lord, I'm sorry. That's all it is. God, I'm sorry for the wrong that I've done. And I now receive mercy and grace in your place. In place of that sin and brokenness, I receive mercy and grace. And I receive forgiveness, and I choose to follow you, the Lord of Seven. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I hope I made you think a little bit about seven and about our world. And I can't wait to share with you more about seven as it pertains to the Bible. That'll be in the next video. God bless you guys.